We are there. Tom Leyden, our sports director here at Channel 7, is in Indianapolis with Matt Shepard standing by. They left at about 4 a.m. this morning. Tom, what's the vibe down there as we get set for tip-off?
Thanks very much, Brad. We are very excited about being with you here on the Sports Cave this morning. Matt, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, buddy.
And you have been down here. We're inside Champions at the Marriott downtown in Indianapolis, where the Michigan Wolverines have been staying throughout the week. And it's been a pretty cool week, a week that a lot of people pointed to this Sunday, hoping that Michigan and Michigan State might finally meet each other in the Big Ten tournament. And here it is, and what a great stage.
It's hard to believe that they've never met in the Big Ten tournament before, but now I think this is the game that so many people, well, outside Indianapolis maybe not so much, but here as you're walking around, a lot of people were anticipating these two teams because they still believe these are the two best teams in the conference.
All right, well, Dave Burkett just said, Matt, that he felt Tom Izzo is going to put a higher priority on this game than maybe even some games and how Michigan State does in the national tournament. I don't know if I'd go that far, but you know that this game means a lot to Tom Izzo based on the interactions you've had this week.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a bigger priority than the NCAA tournament, because if you lose in the NCAA tournament, your season is over. But I do believe, I would agree with Dave in this sense, this is an awful lot of meaning for Tom Izzo because he has seen where Michigan has risen to with John Beilein and because of what took place earlier this year.
Teams this week, when I look at what Michigan State's been able to do, they're finally clicking on all cylinders. And I don't think there's much argument that when this team does click on all cylinders, it is among the best teams in the country. But they've had pieces missing throughout the year, and now they're finally getting back together. Michigan's looked good. They've been in tighter battles in this specific tournament, but you can't fight what they've done. And 7 out of 9 against Michigan State means something, doesn't it?
Yeah, and 6-2 in games decided by one possession is pretty impressive for the Wolverines. Michigan State does have their guys back together, and I know that's what everybody is falling back on, but they also have all their guys back together against Ohio State, and they lost by double digits in Columbus, and we conveniently forget that. They had most, if not all, their guys back together when they lost at home to Illinois, except for Brandon Dawson, but he is a difference maker for this club. Both teams are very good basketball teams. That's hard for people to truly believe. For years we've wanted, hey, let's get Michigan and Michigan State like North Carolina and Duke. Now we have it over the last 5 years or so, and people are all trying to figure out which one's better all the time. I think they're both outstanding programs.
We'll talk about keys to the game when you come back to us after 30. One thing I think that jumps out that we need to address is how will Michigan match that intensity, that natural intensity that Michigan State's going to bring to the game today, knowing that they don't want to get swept 3 games out of 3.
The one thing you can say about Michigan State, they do have that focus. When there is a task at hand to try and exact a little revenge, they usually come out and perform very well. Remember, at Chrysler Center, they had a big lead against the Wolverines because Michigan had beaten them in the first game in East Lansing, and Michigan obviously came back. So you're right about that. I think Michigan's going to have to match that type of focus. I know it's a cliche, the first 5 minutes of each half, but especially in this one for Michigan, they can't get behind by double digits early.
What I've always appreciated as I've gotten to know more about John Beilein and his coaching staff is how he's gotten his team to improve throughout a season, as the season progresses. This is not the same team that we saw back in November and December. So as we look ahead to whatever happens today, where do you see Michigan falling? Do you think that they've proven enough over the course of these last 2 months that they are a valid #1 seed contender?
I think 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, for lack of a better phrase, almost backs their way in because of the teams like Syracuse and Villanova who have blown the opportunity to seize that chance. Virginia's still on there in the discussion for sure. I think they've already got 2 brackets made up, the NCAA tournament. Usually the Big Ten tournament championship game doesn't affect what happens for that final bracket. And I think Michigan, I wouldn't be surprised, depending on what Virginia does today, because their game might end earlier, Michigan might be that final #1. And I thought Wisconsin had a shot until they lost yesterday. Wisconsin's a legitimate 2. Michigan's no worse than a 2 seed. They'll be in Milwaukee, and then I think they'll be here. I think Michigan State has played themselves into a 3 seed.
And has Michigan State perhaps played themselves into a closer game? That's something that this tournament might have helped them out with, because many of the projections had Michigan State as the team who maybe went to San Diego or the team that went out to Spokane. Do they perhaps, because of the showing that they've given us this week, have they earned a spot perhaps in Buffalo or in it's just a little bit closer to home?
I don't think there's any question about it. St. Louis or Buffalo are the 2 places I think you'll see Michigan State go. I think you'll see Michigan and Milwaukee Milwaukee and then Indianapolis.
All right, well, it's going to be an exciting day. The doors just opened here in Champion, so hopefully some more people will join the party here with us. 11 o'clock is when they open the doors. We'll talk more about the specific keys to today's game, how Michigan State wins, how Michigan wins. That's coming up a little bit after 11:30. But for Matt Shepard, I'm Tom Leyden, reporting live in Indianapolis. Let's send it back to you guys in the Sports Cave.
All right, from the bar to the cave. Thanks a lot, guys. We appreciate the time. We don't have any drinks. Hopefully they'll get to...
It's St. Patty's Day this weekend. Come on.
How about that?
Yeah.
We got to get something out here.
That's why Leyden went up there.
We've got green water or green
okay.
beverages in our cups that awaits.
Is that good?
us. I
Green
don't
water?
know. Probably not. We have talked at length about this game, Michigan State, the Big Ten title championship game here in Indianapolis. Our guys are on the ground, though. Tom Leyden is in Indianapolis with the guy who will be on the call for Michigan, Matt Shepard. Guys, what's going on?
Thanks, Brad, very much. Matt Shepard and I standing by here inside Champions at the Marriott Hotel, and there's some excitement in the sound. Con is also going on this weekend, so we've seen some interesting people walking around, but we promised that we'd give you some of the keys to victory, because that's the point where we've come to. And I've heard a lot of talk about the fact that, Brandon Dawson didn't play in those first two games. Is he that much of a key factor that he can get Michigan State over the hump?
Yeah, I think so. 19 times he's had 7 rebounds or more this year. That tells you something about how effective he can be. So he's a monster on the glass, and he's a really good defender. He closes out really well, so that will be one of those keys for sure.
What I've loved about watching Michigan play throughout this entire season is, early on it appeared as though opponents had figured out that if you can stop Nick Stauskas, you can stop Michigan. But the Michigan coaching staff figured out how to work around that. The rest of the guys matured, and I think that they've figured out how to win even if Nick doesn't have a big game. Can Michigan win if Nick doesn't have a big game?
Well, it depends on what you consider a big game, okay? He's got 27 double-digit performances this year. He's the player of the year, so you would figure, yes. If he scores below his average, which is 17.5, do you think they can still win? Look, if he pumps it for 14 points down the stretch when the game is tight, I would say yes. Michigan, though, needs that balance, I think, of Robinson, LeVert, and Stauskas. Do they have another guy who can fill those shoes if one of those guys is off? Derek Walton has done it so far this year 7 times in Big Ten play. But Nick Stauskas is a guy who averaged 22 points per game against Michigan State this year. I think he's a factor. When Michigan gets double digits from Stauskas, Robinson, and LeVert, they're 12-2. The losses, Arizona and Wisconsin.
Oh, respectable losses, to say the least. I think that if either team doesn't get an optimal performance from one of their key guys, they're going to be at a clear disadvantage. So who's that guy going to be? Is there somebody who you foresee who may struggle because of the matchup, because of the one-on-one matchup specifically that he's going to be going up against today?
Well, I think, that's a really good question. Probably Glenn Robinson against a guy like Brandon Dawson, because Dawson can be that physical force, although Glenn Robinson has really been aggressive as of late. 7 straight games of double-digit performances. He's increased his numbers. He's shooting over 50% over the last 7 to 8 games. So if you had to pick one matchup, that would be it. I'm looking at more who's the guy who's going to step forward to be that if the 3 big guys for Michigan State performs in Harris and Appling and Payne, is Dawson that 4th? Who's the 4th from Michigan? Derek Walton has been that guy before. It'll be important for him to try and at least match what Keith Appling does today.
We've talked hypothetically for a total of about 10 minutes. It's now our turn to give you the tangible choice. Who are you going to go with today?
Here's what people forget. Michigan State has turned, they don't want to admit this, they've turned into a jump shooting team. That's what they are. They shot 50% combined in the 2 games against Michigan. They've actually shot better against Michigan this year than the Wolverines have done the opposite. Michigan State has set a school record for number of 3-pointers made. They are not that team that everybody grew up thinking, oh, they're a big, bad bruising club. They can be, and they're good defensively, but they're not the same typical Michigan State team. This is going to be really tough for Michigan. Can they match that focus? It's going to be really hard for the Wolverines to do that because MSU wants it so desperately.
So you say Michigan State today?
Well, my say Michigan because it has been a game of first, but it will be a very tight game down the stretch. If Michigan can make it tight down the stretch, I think they prevail.
Probably shouldn't have put him on the spot. You can hear Matt calling the game live on WWJ today. Tip-off at 3:30. I'm going to go with the Wolverines. I think this is their year. I think they do make it 3 for 3. Either way, we're going to be covering a winning team and a losing team for you here on 7 today. Reporting live from Indianapolis with Matt Shepard, I'm Tom Leyden. Let's send it back to you guys.
Thanks, fellas. Get some sleep. I don't think Tom slept last night, driving through the night to get down to Indy to be live with
They'll
us.
also be with them when the brackets are announced, so that's going to be a big deal as well.
Exciting.
They'll be right there. By the way, just checking, Michigan State a 3.5-point favorite.
Ooh, keep the tweet.